So in this session, I'd like to give you a glance at our strategy, the Sentinel product strategy, and then continue on with the Sentinel roadmap. So to understand our strategy, I would like for us to look at our customer landscape. And this is important in order to understand our strategy. And this landscape includes three types of major customers. We have software vendors that sell B2B software only. It can be on-premise or cloud applications. Typically, these are enterprise-grade types of software, financial, it could be educational, CAD software, and so forth. We also have in our customer landscape device vendors. These are vendors that sell intelligent devices with embedded software in it. It could be industrial machines, medical devices, gaming machines, network appliances, all the way down to microcontrollers and bare metal devices. And we also have cloud providers. They typically sell cloud services and applications, and essentially that's all they do. So there's actually no on-premise software there. Today we're very much focused on the first two, on software vendors and device vendors. Now we need to look further to understand our strategy. We need to look at how the market is evolving, because this very much affects our strategy. And we need to look at this market evolution from the landscape perspective, meaning at software vendors and device vendors, because their evolution, their challenges, and their needs are completely different. So I'll start with software vendors. So for software vendors, let me first explain the chart here, the illustration. The x-axis represents the complexity level of the monetization model that they're using, and the y-axis represents time. So 3 decades ago, software vendors initially protected their software against theft of their IP and illegal copying, and distributed it with a perpetual license. And customers could then, virtually use the software indefinitely, but it was protected against copying. Later, vendors, as time proceeds here, later vendors realized that they can gain revenue by charging for specific features and software add-ons, and started using feature-based models and licensing. Then about 10 years ago, something happened. There was a tipping point, so to speak, where software vendors started employing connectivity and delivering software as a service, and that was a market disruption. So suddenly I, as a software vendor, I saw my competitors offering subscription-based models, which gave them an advantage from an end customer perspective, and it also gave them a step into recurring revenue models. And then we started seeing more advanced licensing and business models, such as named users and usage-based models, where end customers pay for for what they use and pay as they go. And all of these became possible because of connectivity and the cloud. So leveraging connectivity and having the ability to transition to recurring revenue, licensing revenue models gives vendors the ability, and I spoke about this yesterday, it gives them the ability to be much more competitive in terms of pricing, to lower the entry costs for their customers, and it also makes it much more easier for end customers to scale up or down based on demand and capacity. Mind you, in terms of where they are, we see software vendors across the entire spectrum or continuum here. In fact, we do hear some industry analysts claiming that still about 40% of software vendors are still selling perpetual software only. But in terms of where we are, where many of our customers are, our focus is here, where it says we are here. In the more advanced and recurring revenue models, our solutions are geared towards this part of the evolution continuum, and this is where we're putting most of our development efforts. So given that evolution that you just saw, the challenges that software vendors are facing, and we heard a lot about that in quite a few of the sessions yesterday, so I'll just reiterate some of that. We see that the challenges that software vendors are facing start with the fact that it's hard for them to adapt to new recurring revenue models from every aspect. Advanced or recurring revenue models, if they're not automated, they require a lot of manual work, and we heard about that yesterday. We see that many vendors are still using manual processes to manage the licensing lifecycle. Everything is done manually, from order entry to license creation, to delivery, deployment, upgrades, and so forth. In addition, vendors also need an easy transition to connected licensing because especially large vendors are very slow to change. From what we're seeing, they're very slow to change the way that they sell and deploy software. And then there's also the impact on the end customers when it comes to licensing in general. When the model is perpetual, it's relatively easy from an end customer perspective. The license is locked and that's it, and they can use it virtually indefinitely. But when more advanced models are coming into play, vendors want to make sure that the fact that they employ these licensing models won't affect their end customer experience, and if anything, will improve it. I think I'm going to need a sip of water. Excuse me just a minute. So in order to address the evolution that I'm talking about, the challenges that software vendors are having, their needs, we've developed several solutions and made several significant achievements in the past year, and we're continuing in this direction to support software vendors as they transition into more connected and cloud-based licenses. Hillary Clinton, right? Sorry. Okay, moving on to device vendors. So when it comes to device vendors, the challenges are quite different. For years, these vendors have been selling hardware, devices, equipment. That's all they know. But hardware, we know that hardware is becoming a commodity. Products are becoming mature, standardized, much cheaper. On the other hand, we're hearing from device vendors that they're investing over 70% of their development efforts in the software that's embedded in the devices, but they gain no revenue there. Revenue comes just from selling the next device. And if you remember, just in the last, the session before, remember the hidden gems that Madhavan spoke about. So they've got a ton of gems in that device and they gain no revenue from that. Because further regarding the challenges of device vendors, because the features are software hard-coded in the devices, vendors have to keep multiple variants of their devices, and they have to stock some reasonable supply of units that are pre-configured in order to be able to address different market needs. And maybe this, what I'm saying, maybe this resonates with some of you who are device vendors. And we're seeing that device vendors also, to some extent, lack flexibility because when the features are hard-coded, embedded in the software, they need to change the actual embedded software in order to add or change features, and this obviously affects time to market. So device vendors realize that they're now realizing that the unique selling point of their devices is in the software and that there's value there. They're now understanding that they need to monetize the software running on their devices and to offer solutions rather than hardware or equipment in order to gain competitive advantage and overcome price erosion due to the commoditization of the hardware. And this requires device vendors to go through a transition from being hardware-centric to a much more software-centric and solution and services-centric business, including how they package, how they deploy, how they license, and how they manage their software across the board and all the licensing. But selling software when you're a device vendor and with a very much hardware mindset, so to speak, this brings also additional challenges such as a lot of operational issues, how to manage the software supply chain, ordering, fulfillment, delivery, and so forth. So in terms of the market evolution for device vendors, here the story is a bit different compared to the evolution of software vendors. In order to survive, and definitely looking ahead into the IoT world, device vendors need to go through a transformation whereby through innovation and differentiation, and they need to do this via software services and data. So looking at this evolution, the x-axis represents the transformation through the vendor's various revenue sources, and the y-axis represents the development of this transformation towards IoT use cases. So if you look at the chart, revenue initially comes from selling the hardware itself. And then vendors realize that the embedded software has value and it can be sold. So they're some of them are already licensing software, turning features on and off. And we're also seeing some that are also selling solutions with software and service. We just heard in the recent session selling services and leveraging connectivity. The next phase in this continuum is revenue that comes from selling data that originates from the devices. And the final phase is getting revenue from third-party vendors who provide services by leveraging that data. We and many of our customers are here in the more lower part of this continuum, while we do have a significant foothold in the software vendors market and in their evolution. We're still in the first evolution phase with software vendors, and this is where device vendors need our help most. and this is why they come to us. This is actually our vision and where we're, looking forward, our horizon, our strategy, and we are focusing. This is where we're focusing in terms of long-term product development and evolution. We're doing lots of stuff to support device vendors' evolution and the challenges that they're facing. You'll hear about it in a minute. And this includes also licensing solutions for a wide range of operating systems and platforms used by their embedded software. So we're seeing lots of change and disruption, which also brings a lot of threats. But data, cloud, devices, connectivity, how we buy, all of these also bring lots of opportunities into the market. But they also bring greater complexity, more concerns over security, and greater demands on licensing. And all of this requires, definitely from us, we definitely see this, new approaches. Connectivity, for example, requires addressing licenses from a user perspective and not from a machine perspective. The huge amount, the diversity of devices and platforms out there increases the challenges of providing application security for all of these different environments. And all this flexibility, on the one hand, a lot of flexibility, we do get increased complexity when it comes to the back office. So moving on to our accomplishments this past year and the roadmap, we did lots of things and we're planning even more, and you'll hear about it. But to cover it all, I would probably have to stand here at least half a day. So what I'm going to do, I'm just, we cherry-picked the accomplishments and the features moving forward, and I'm essentially just going to present the highlights. So I'll start with Sentinel EMS. We're hearing from customers and vendors, software vendors and device vendors alike, that in many cases they're using multiple and different enforcement and licensing systems across several products. We heard yesterday Juniper mentioned 23 license key locking mechanisms. We know that HP have something like 50 or maybe even 70 licensing systems across all their products. It could also be a case where customers are using Sentinel RMS, our solution on one product line, and homegrown or third-party solutions for other products. And as such, they don't want to use a different entitlement system for each one of the product lines. And they need a single backend that supports all of these licensing systems across the board. And this is our biggest achievement when it comes to EMS this past year. Vendors also want a unified solution to address all the licensing needs for on-premise and cloud software monetization. So the result of this year's efforts, and it was, trust me, it was a very big effort. We spent a lot of resources and invested a lot. So the result is a single EMS, a single solution, a single backend, supporting RMS, our software-based licensing solution, cloud licensing, Sentinel Fit, which is a new solution. I'll talk about that in a minute. Third-party solutions, homegrown licensing systems, all in a single platform, ensuring automation and operational efficiency across the board. Looking forward, we're planning an EMS integrated ESD as a service. We're hearing from vendors and customers that they want the ability to use a single interface to associate downloads to product releases and entitlements and send automated notifications to their end customers. So the EMS fully integrated ESD will provide an integrated experience for customers using a single interface via EMS, not only to manage the software uploads and downloads, but also to manage the delivery to end customers based on entitlements. So essentially, the integrated ESD eliminates the complexity of having separate ESD portal via a simplified EMS interface, and enables delivering software upgrades, new features and patches via the customer portal. We're hearing from our customers and from the market that, especially large vendors, they need a way to enable different groups within their organization to access various EMS operations and data on a group level. So, for example, vendors with large product portfolios and multiple business units, they often need to maintain separation of tasks on the business unit level in order to ensure that only the right people with the right set of permissions can perform certain operations. This could also be required in various scenarios where one or more business units deal with sensitive user information that can't be exposed to other business units or other groups. So group access control, this is a feature that will allow vendors to create various user groups and associate granular permissions regarding which operations are allowed to each group. It's the ability to group together various users of EMS into individual groups, and then you simply apply the permissions of what they're able and allowed to do. What transactions, what products they're able to access, and you apply the permission on a group level rather than on an individual user level. So this makes the management of users' permission far more straightforward, especially for large organizations that have maybe hundreds of users that are using EMS. We're hearing from customers, software vendors and device vendors, that they need a way to get and present to their customer a much more device-centric view that allows them not only to see what are all the licenses that are active along with all the history of the transactions, but also to allow them to perform various licensing transactions that, like revoke or rehost in a much easier way. So device licensing management, this is a way to represent a device or any kind of target system for licenses in a much more holistic way. And a device, when we say device here, a device can be, it can represent really any end device, a machine, a network, a VM, anything, any entity that contains licenses. And it might have one or more different locking IDs, but it acts as a whole, as a device, as an entity. So you might have a whole bunch of different licenses on a machine or on the device, and some of them lock to the MAC ID, some of them lock to the disk ID, and they're all from different, they all come from different products. Just as an example, think of a case where a machine, a device, goes down for whatever reason, and you want to be able to rehost all those licenses from that machine to another machine, and you want to be able to do that in a single transaction and take all those licenses from one machine or one device and deploy them on another one. So device licensing management is all about managing transaction at a license container or entity or device level rather than on a single transaction level. And this also gives end customers the ability to look at the device or a machine or a network and say, I want to see all my licenses. Show me all my licenses per this entity. And this, of course, also has relevance to usage because you can then generate usage reports on a device, against a device, certain device on a device level. To be more efficient and automated, customers are coming to us and asking for the ability to perform batch activations on a group of devices in a single operation without having to make multiple activation calls. Vendors often, we hear that they often need to activate devices in factory scenarios before shipping them to their end customers or to further down the chain. So batch activation actually gets over the hassle of individual activation of each device. And it can also be used by vendors while activating a large number of devices for their end customers. Okay, moving on to, we will take questions after I finish, so I'll just continue and we'll address those afterwards. Sentinel RMS and SCL. SCL is our Sentinel cloud solution. We've been on quite a journey with RMS in the past year in order to offer a single solution for cloud-based software vendors as well as on-premise. Our first step this past year, in the beginning of the year, was to offer what we called leased licenses, where licenses are deployed from the cloud on-premise and use phone home mechanism, so to speak, where the RMS server, the license server, needs to connect the Sentinel cloud server to check that all licenses are current and up to date and to get license extensions and new license terms. So that was the first step. In our second step, we provided, and this was released several months ago, we provided pure cloud licensing. These are licenses that are never deployed in the end customer but are kept in the cloud, more specifically in Sentinel, in SCL. And the applications just simply communicate directly with SCL, with the Sentinel Cloud Server, to get permission or denial to run. It's a license deployment that's fully dependent on connectivity. So it's a model that's mainly focused at hosted and web applications. And the main benefit here is that license changes are applied dynamically, instantly, globally. There's no requirement to push updates down to end customers and distribute new licenses. Any change that that's reflected in Sentinel, in SCL, in the Sentinel Cloud, is instantly available for users. So with pure cloud licensing that we just recently released as the second phase, we pretty much have a single solution that can address the needs for on-premise, disconnected users, to hybrid and lease types of deployments, all the way to hosted and SaaS type of applications. Another benefit is the ability to collect usage. Usage is aggregated in the cloud, and then you can generate reports via EMS against that usage. So, you know, we see that vendors have multiple types of applications and multiple types of deployments and numerous types of customer install bases. So this is actually one solution that covers, you know, the entire deployment spectrum. We have just one, we think we have just one more tiny step that we plan to do with regards to transition to cloud in order to have really very much a complete end-to-end solution. And this is when we will offer licensing web services. The main benefit of this, of course, is that it's completely platform agnostic. It's directly associated with cloud licensing, and it's a way of interacting with licenses that are stored in the cloud. But instead of using an API, which is of course platform and operating system dependent, these web services can be used from any platform that supports web services. Fingerprint tolerance addresses probably one of the biggest source of end customer support calls. We hear customers, vendors that are doing traditional licensing saying, you know, customers are calling us up, they're phoning, they're saying, I swapped my Ethernet card, or I changed my hard disk, and now my license doesn't work anymore. So this feature is basically a concept where the vendor can set up rules to lock the license. For example, they can decide that out of the five different things that I would normally lock the license to, I'm going to find a rule where it can be locked to any three of them, which can be changed. Okay, they can be altered, and I don't care which of the three, but two of them need to be locked and fixed. So it's really up to the vendor to decide how loose or tight they want to make these rules. And this probably, you know, changes from region to region, right? And from install base to install base. And it really depends on the trust that a vendor has with their various customers, maybe in various locations or with various products. So we really do expect that this feature is going to eliminate one of the more disturbing issues with licensing, where the locking randomly changes or users are doing stuff that they wouldn't expect the locking to change and the license then to stop working. We're planning security enhancements for RMS. We're going to introduce an IP protection tool with the Sentinel envelope on Windows and Linux for RMS. And this is probably the most widely deployed IP protection solution in the industry, which some of you actually may be familiar with if you're using LDK or any of our hardware-based keys. So basically, it's the same technology, and it's a technology that we're continuously investing in. So like an LDK, the RMS envelope is an automatic, random, multi-layer file wrapper that gives IP protection and prevents reverse engineering through file encryption, code obfuscation, system-level anti-debugging. So with this kind of tool, and if security is important for you, if you're using RMS, your algorithms, your trade secrets, your, you know, all of your professional know-how that's embedded in your software is much more secure against hackers. Another security enhancement that we're planning for RMS is licenses signed with asymmetrical cryptography. Today we're doing it with symmetrical cryptography. And this will result in much higher protection for license generation related exploits. And finally, for RMS, we're going to do much more, but finally, for my session, we'll provide the ability to define user policies that control access to features such as preferred access, exclusive access, denial, and so forth. And this is by leveraging cloud connectivity for easier user management of this. So just as an example, think of a case where you want to ensure that, say, a group of users in China should not be able to access licenses on a server in North America. So, and this feature will enable defining these type of policies. Okay, Sentinel Fit. This is a new solution that recently joined the Sentinel family. I hope some of you had a chance to see the demo station outside showcasing this solution. This is the ideal licensing solution for devices with embedded systems supporting virtually all possible boards and microcontrollers that are available today, and it's completely free from CPU and operating system constraints. The Fit runtime is specifically designed for use in very highly constrained environments. It consumes a low portion of the available free resources on the device, and it offers literally the smallest available licensing footprint on the market today. Device vendors get a really high degree of portability because we offer a feature-rich SDK that's suitable for development on all device platforms. It supports a wide range of environments and platforms across numerous operating systems, different CPU architectures, and different types of boards. Sentinel Fit also offers feature-based licensing, so enabling vendors to turn features on and off. Remember when I spoke about the evolution, this is one of the phases that device vendors are going through, selling their software by turning features on and off. So this feature is available with Sentinel Fit. And it also enables them to reduce inventory costs. Remember I spoke about some of their challenges through licensing of product variations on a single device. And with the recent achievements that we've had in EMS in the past year, remember I spoke about a single back-end solution, we get operational efficiency by managing the licensing lifecycle of Fit licenses in this single EMS solution, and this can be done also in conjunction with other licensing systems such as RMS or any other third-party or homegrown solution. One of the major capabilities that we're planning for Fit moving forward is controlled manufacturing. So if, for example, you have a third-party manufacturer that manufactures your device, you want to be able to give them the ability to generate a limited amount or a limited quota of licenses and install them on the devices they manufacture during production. And you want to be able also to generate reports of how many licenses were generated by the third-party manufacturer and to which of the devices they were applied. So controlled manufacturing actually prevents third-party manufacturers from performing overproduction and selling devices and their licenses where the vendor basically doesn't get paid and doesn't profit. And this is also a mechanism for gaining efficiency to some extent, because then you can securely outsource the entire production to third parties, including the actual process of generating licenses. I just want to emphasize that we do have the online solution for this by simply activating through via EMS. But we have to remember that production floors, in most cases, need to do this offline. And this is what controlled manufacturing is going to enable, to do all of this offline. Okay, and finally, moving on to LDK. How many LDK users customers do we have here, or hardware keys? Where from? Customer? Name? Okay. And we had also X-Rite. I guess he's not here. And? Trimble? Yeah, Trimble are hardware keys. Yep. Okay. So LDK, for those of you who don't know, this is our hardware and software-based solution, licensing solution that leverages lots of protection features for customers that are mostly very security conscious. So in terms of our accomplishments, our main achievements this past year were, for LDK, were further broadening of our protection and licensing support for additional platforms and operating systems, predominantly, having device vendors also in mind, not just software vendors. You can see the breadth of our support in the table on the left. So we expanded our envelope IP protection for Android, native binaries, provided an API, an envelope for both Sentinel HL, the hardware key, and SL, the software-based key for Android on x86. And we extended cross-locking for supported platforms by adding Sentinel SL API for Linux ARM. App on chip, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is the strongest Sentinel HL security capability available, because it allows for part of the code, part of the application code, to actually execute on the Sentinel HL hardware chip. This is a very powerful feature. It's implemented automatically by using the Sentinel envelope for LDK. So now, in addition to having app on chip for 32-bit Windows binaries, we're also extending that to support 64-bit. Application integrity, this is all about ensuring that devices have software that checks itself if it's been modified or tampered before it actually executes. And this is because, well, think of an application on a device that somebody changes it, modifies a DLL or the data, and then the device misbehaves or doesn't function properly according to the way you intended for it to behave. Think, for example, of the logic of the payout of a casino machine and what could happen if that logic is changed. Or think of certain parameters used for calibrating equipment and what might happen if these are changed for any reason. So application integrity is all about ensuring the authenticity of the application and the data files, and this is a very strong feature which we're planning to provide and will be available via the envelope with automatic checks. And by the way, it's not only for LDK, we'll have it also for Fit and other solutions. So just to summarize, again, these are just highlights. We're doing much more. We're seeing that the market is evolving. There's lots of disruption. Software vendors are looking to become much more services-oriented. Device vendors are trying to transition from being hardware vendors to solution providers. And while all of this is happening, we will continue to further automate EMS to ensure greater operational efficiency and visibility for vendors and customers. We'll continue investing in RMS to offer connected experience and more end customer control. For our new family member, Sentinel Fit, will further provide more licensing models and protection to support the embedded market. And for Sentinel LDK, we'll continue, this will continue to be the strongest software protection solution on the market, and will further enhance and provide powerful security capabilities and further support additional platforms. Oh. Okay, so we're ready to, we would like to receive your questions. I'm sure there are many. In order to address your questions, we have the entire product team here. Come on, stand up, all of you, stand up. You deserve the recognition. Michael Tsunke, also known as Mitsu, CTO, Todd Steele, Product Manager for LDK, Fit, IoT and Embedded, Kapil Digani, Product Manager for EMS, Dharam Ramatala, Product Manager for RMS, Sridhar Tatavarthi, Product Manager for EMS, and the King, Jake Fox, who we all report to. Please take, this is a chance.
From a schedule perspective, we're good. I think we're going to take a shorter break, so we're not going to take a whole half hour. So we can use this to ask questions if you do. So don't hold back because of that. So
we're okay.
Yep, we
so
absolutely
please,
are allowed to ask questions.
Mark. Right. Okay. So just to paraphrase on that, the question is the whole phone home mechanism, what are the legal implications there and what we're hearing from customers. Dharam, can you take that?
So there's two aspects to the phoning home. One is it's not really sending information back per se. It's pulling down refreshed license terms, right? That it's a dependency on renewing that license just to do a background check to see if anything's changed or anything's been upgraded or downgraded. Initial activation kind of sits in that first bucket. This is almost like a very short-term activation that has to be renewed, right? We do that because it simplifies changing license terms, upgrades, downgrades. You can go in any direction you want if you want to extend or shorten terms and stuff like that. The other aspect is using that same handshake, for want of a better word, to send usage data back, right? So that's where we start leveraging that connectivity to send information the other way as well. It's not mandatory, for one. So some customers just simply don't want to do a usage model, but they still want to be able to leverage that dynamic control mechanism. So the usage doesn't have to be transmitted anyway. But when the usage is playing a role, it's usually, there's various policies around anonymization, what kind of data gets sent back. By default, we're not sending any anything that kind of fits that sensitive characteristic, user-related data, individual-related data, usernames, host names, that kind of stuff. So I think maybe Couple, you can probably expand on that, of what we're doing. This is something which is ongoing as well, right? You know, there's more anonymization capability, you know, that we're looking at to include. Right. So the opt-in is it's basically how do we, you know, there's in different regions especially, you've got this opt-out versus opt-in requirement where customers have to be able to they have to say I want to basically opt-in, as you say, right? In other regions, it's more common to have customers opt in automatically and they have the option of opting out, right? This is ultimately completely up to yourselves as the vendor, right? We're not forcing any direction. You know, by default we're off anyway, right? That usage tracking is disabled. It's something that the vendors enable, and that can then be based on policy. Is it blanket on, right, and then users are opting out, or do you simply is it reactive and it's an opt-in model? So
one successful way of implementing this is really driven by how you engage with the customer. You know, can you hear me? Is that better? I suck with mics. I really do. That's why they didn't let me speak this year. So it's really how you design your engagement with the customer. So starting with your license model, your business model, how you handle your contractual terms. In many cases, if you set this up in the most extreme state, right, you're saying, okay, I have a usage-based model, I'm collecting usage, it's almost inherently understood by the customer that you're going to be collecting some amount of information. So it's important to be transparent about what you're collecting in order to gain their comfort and their acceptance. In other cases, you may not be collecting any information, and therefore you should also be explicit about that. So you're basically mitigating a defensive position where you're, you know, openly saying all we're doing is enabling the activation of your license on your system or whatever the case may be. So.
But are people embedding an opt-in statement in a generic rule and then doing people accept, or are they going beyond that to make sure that there's explicit opt-in?
I've heard of customers doing that. Yes. Yeah. And that's on their choice at what point in the application it makes best sense to do that, or the service, whatever the case may be. So, next question.
This is an opportunity. You've got the entire product team here. Please. Fingerprint, yeah.
Hi, my name is Niranjan. So in today's world, the software is delivered in containers or in virtual appliances, and there is no everything is virtual. The MAC address, the device IDs, the IP address, everything is virtual. So there is no constant parameters. And I do scale. I don't run in we sell the product, so we don't run in an instance of a product because we scale across multiple instances served by a load balancer. So in this load balanced environment with varying containers, scale in and scale out, how do you license it or to a particular instance of a product? I mean, because any locking parameter is changing, so I can replicate the duplicate or another instances, right?
You're talking about the kind of, you know, the VMware type concepts like live migration and all that kind of stuff, right? There's really two ways of doing this. I guess there's three ways of doing this. You can use a very, very soft but fixed parameter, things like FQDN, right, of the VM, right? It's you're far more into a softer approach to licensing ultimately anyway. If you have connectivity within this data center, within the VM infrastructure, it's a great use case for the cloud-based licensing, because you're putting the control of the policy completely outside of that infrastructure. So that's one of the, in my opinion, one of the kind of most immediate use cases that we see for connected licensing that Laila was talking about. The third option, and we find this works for a lot of customers, is if that infrastructure doesn't have connectivity or doesn't have reliable connectivity, you can place local license management within some fixed domain, some fixed server, something like that, that's within reach, within sight of that infrastructure. And ultimately, it's the same principle, right? You're just taking the license control outside of that because it's so dynamic in nature, right? So fingerprinting really kind of goes out the window in that scenario. So you want to put the fingerprinting control outside of that into some kind of trusted environment like the cloud or something. Okay. Oops, sorry.
Okay,
Hey,
thank
guys.
you. Oh, sorry, where? Oh, okay.
We're a Sentinel Cloud user. I talked a little bit to Kapil about this, but now there's Sentinel Cloud, there's SCL, and then there's maybe EMS, other forms of EMS cloud support. Can you guys just, I mean, I haven't had a sales call recently, so I need to, and I don't really want one, but can you guys just steer me towards what if I want to kind of think about where this is going, what should I be looking at in terms of, is SCL, kind of what I should start thinking about and trying to get smarter about, or just help shape my thinking towards which of the stuff I should be thinking about this is going to evolve to.
So, as we discussed briefly yesterday also, Chris, our future is definitely what we're talking here, which is SCL. What SCL is nothing but something that is evolved from what we have done with Sentinel Cloud, what we have done with RMS, and what we have done with EMS. So instead of maintaining multiple solutions that were solving similar needs in many ways and different needs, so we wanted to bring everything together, and that brings in best of everything and creates a solution that makes it easy for us to evolve it further and make it easy for our customers to, of course, solve all their needs. So what we have learned from Sentinel Cloud, we have improved it and combined it with the RMS. Again, that's a pretty old solution, roughly 10 years, more than 10 years, right? And also, of course, combined with our Premier EMS. So from the future perspective, that's definitely something that you should be looking at. We will provide a way forward for existing Sentinel Cloud customers to migrate and move to this new solution. We are still working out on the details on that. We can have conversations around that as well. But that's where we are looking at. That's what our future is.
Hi, my question is about subscription renewal and monetization. Does your product help, can it interface with our ERP systems to auto bill? What would it take to do that? And then in the case of billing, have you seen in the industry, do most companies backdate their subscription renewals to the last day that it previously ended? Or do companies typically just let it keep on going and then say, hey, until you cancel, we won't stop billing you?
Sridhar.
Understand the question. Your question is, what do we have in terms of product to support billing?
Just an interface to our ERP.
to interface to your ERP.
Yeah, when the license, when the subscription, I guess after, say, the first year, to auto-renew, like what it does.
Right. So to interface to ERP, we obviously have all the web services, industry standard web services. All of them are, SOAP-based, so you can integrate to ERP using that, right? And as your customers use the software, you could send the usage information along, right? Using SCL and RMS, right? Once you do that, you have all the usage information within EMS, and we have a way to provide you that usage information back to whichever billing systems you use. And we have a lot of customers doing that today. So if you want to talk more about how some of them do it, we can help you do that.
You had a second question, though, about auto-renewal, right? So it's more of a best practices question, I think, about how often customers choose to do auto-renewal of subscriptions. And I really think it depends on the nature of the product and the nature of who you sell into. So I think the closer you get to a B2C scenario, you'll see the auto-renewals. And the further you get towards an enterprise, you won't see the auto-renewals, is my experience working with customers.
Thank you.
Yeah.